Remember when Friday nights meant gathering around the TV, singing along to Family Matters theme song, and feeling like part of the Winslow family? Welcome to Black Destiny, where we uncover the untold stories, the unexpected twists, and the heartbreaking losses of the family we grew up with. What makes someone truly cool? Is it the clothes they wear, the way they walk, or the confidence they exude? If so, why did Steve Urkel, whose IQ soared at 196, struggle so hard to fit in? Born to Dr. Herb Urkel and Diane Roberta Urkel, Stephen Quincy Urkel entered the world as a boy destined to stand out. Jaleel White was barely 12 when he stepped into Urkel's oversized shoes, high-water pants, jumbo glasses, and extra-large suspenders along with nasal-toned catchphrases. Urkel was a genius, a boy with a heart as big as his brain, an unshakable optimist who refused to let the world's cruelty define him. Steve's story wasn't just about being a nerd. It was about embracing who you are, no matter what others think. He loved fiercely, forgave easily, and never stopped believing in himself. As the years passed, Urkel evolved, his voice deepened, his style matured. Yet his heart and spirit remained the same. His story teaches us that kindness, even in the face of cruelty, is the greatest superpower. What happens when the smartest girl in the room meets the clumsiest boy on the planet? Stuck between an older brother and a younger sister, Laura Winslow was the middle child and eldest daughter of Carl Otis Winslow and Harriet Winslow. Laura had beauty, brains, and a legendary eye roll aimed directly at her nerdy neighbor, Steve Urkel. Played by a 13-year-old teenage Kellie Shanygne Williams, Laura represented the teenage dream. Straight A's, a spot on the cheer squad, and a confidence that made her the center of attention. She had suitors left and right, but none as persistent as Steve, whose love for her was both infuriating and oddly endearing. Though she often dismissed him with a sarcastic remark, Laura's heart was bigger than she let on. Beneath her witty comebacks was a young woman learning that kindness, even toward the most aggravating people, has power. Laura's story reminds us that patience isn't just about putting up with someone, it's about realizing that sometimes the most persistent people are the ones who care the most. What happens when the coolest guy in the room also happens to be the most clueless? Eddie Winslow had the swagger, the charm, and just enough common sense to get himself into and barely out of trouble. At just 15 years old, Darius McCrary brought Eddie to life. As the only son and eldest child of Carl Otis Winslow and Harriet Winslow, with a love for fast cars and pretty girls, Eddie was the classic teenage heartthrob. But school, that was another story. His grades were average, his decisions questionable, and his judgment, with a police captain for a father, let's just say Eddie kept the man's patience and blood pressure in constant check. But beneath Eddie's easygoing bravado was a kid trying to prove himself. His story reminds us that growing up isn't about avoiding mistakes, it's about learning from them, and sometimes the best lessons come with a well-earned lecture from Dad. How do you balance being a tough cop and a loving dad without losing your mind? If anyone could answer that, it was Carl Winslow. Played by the brilliant Reginald VelJohnson, at just 36 years old, Carl was the rock of the Winslow household. As a Chicago police officer, he upheld the law with pride, working his way up from sergeant to captain. At home, however, enforcing the rules was a whole different battle, especially with a son who lacked common sense, a daughter too smart for her own good, and a nerdy neighbor who never seemed to go away. Carl took his role as provider seriously, even if it meant building things himself to save a buck and regretting it later. Beneath his frugality and exasperation, he was a devoted father and husband, proving that love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up, even when patience is running on empty. How does one woman juggle being a wife, a mother, and the glue that holds everything together? Harriet Winslow proved that she could. Played by Jo Marie Payton at 38 years old, Harriet had an unshakable love for her family and a wisdom that kept them all from falling apart. She could balance a career, manage a household, and still have the energy to check her both husband and kids when they got too carried away. But being the backbone of a family didn't mean she lost herself in the process. As Carl's wife, she was his steady anchor, and as the mother of Eddie, Laura, and Judy, she balanced discipline with love. She wasn't just the voice of reason, she was the voice that reminded everyone of what really mattered. Her story teaches us that true strength isn't about carrying every burden alone, but knowing when to stand firm, when to compromise, and when to simply love without condition. What makes a child truly special? Is it their ability to take an imperfect life and make it beautiful? 4-year-old Richie Crawford, played by Brighton James, was born into a world with an empty seat at the table, a father he would never meet. But from the moment he opened his eyes, love surrounded him like a fortress. His mother Rachel carried both grief and determination, raising him with enough love for 2 parents. His Aunt Harriet became his wisdom, Uncle Carl his reluctant but devoted protector, and his cousins his built-in best friends. Richie didn't just survive without a father, he thrived, teaching us that family isn't about who's missing, but about who stays. He reminded everyone that love isn't measured in perfection, but in presence. His laughter softened the hardest hearts. His innocence healed old wounds, and his very existence proved that even in loss, love has the power to fill the gaps. What if the world expected you to be one thing, but you turned out to be something else entirely? Waldo Geraldo Faldo was never the smartest guy in the room, but maybe that was never the point. Played by 16-year-old Sean Harrison, Waldo was known for misunderstanding just about everything. Simple instructions, confusing. Common sense, nowhere to be found. And yet, buried beneath all that cluelessness was something remarkable. A kind heart, unwavering loyalty, and hidden talents no one saw coming. When he accidentally discovered his gift for cooking, it was proof that intelligence isn't the only path to success. Some people solve problems with their minds. Waldo solved them with his hands, his heart, and a little bit of butter. He taught us that we can't all be the same, and that's a good thing. Because sometimes the people who seem the most lost are just on a different kind of journey. What happens when love burns too brightly, scorching, suffocating, and leaving nothing but ashes behind? Myra Monkhouse, played by the radiant Michelle Thomas, wasn't just another girlfriend turned ex-girlfriend of Steve Urkel. A teenage girl with brains, beauty, and a heart that beat only for Steve Urkel, Myra was fiercely devoted. But devotion, when unchecked, can become obsession. She wasn't afraid to fight for what she wanted, even when it meant losing herself in the process. Her intelligence made her a perfect match for Steve, yet her possessiveness blinded her to the reality that love isn't about control, it's about trust. Myra's story teaches us that passion is powerful, but love thrives on balance. Sometimes the hardest lesson in life is learning when to hold on and when to let go. In the end, Myra wasn't just a jealous girlfriend. She was a young woman who loved deeply, perhaps too deeply, and that made her unforgettable. What happens when the smallest voice in the room suddenly goes silent? Judy Winslow, played by a young Jamie Foxworth, was the Winslow family's cute, sassy, and often overlooked youngest daughter. As the baby of the family, she lived in the shadows of her older siblings, Eddie and Laura, while navigating childhood under the watchful eyes of her parents Carl and Harriet Winslow. At just 9 years old, she had the wide-eyed innocence of a child discovering the world, hating vegetables, struggling with multiplication, and clinging to her beloved dolls. Yet, like many youngest siblings, she often faded into the background, her presence overshadowed by the chaos of family life. Her story is a reminder that sometimes the ones we take for granted have the most to offer. She teaches us that every child, no matter how small, deserves to be seen and heard. And perhaps most hauntingly, she reminds us how easy it is to disappear when the world stops paying attention. Can a lost boy ever find his way home? Or is he destined to wander forever, longing for a place that doesn't exist? Jerry Jamal Jameson, better known as 3J, had spent his life bouncing from place to place. A visitor in homes that never felt like his own, sarcasm was his shield and laughter his distraction. He never thought he'd have a real family until the Winslows. As the younger adoptive brother of Eddie, Laura, and Judy Winslow, he struggled to believe he truly belonged. But Steve Urkel, the guy everyone underestimated, saw something in him that no one else had: potential. With Urkel's guidance and the Winslows' love, Jerry found something he never imagined: stability. His streetwise, smart-mouthed persona masked a deep longing for permanence, and for the first time, he had it. His story is a testament to resilience, proving that even the most restless souls can find a place to call home. If youth is power, what happens when time takes it away? Rachel Crawford spent years pretending she was the fountain of youth and the essence of timeless beauty. In her late 30s, she flirted with men half her age, tossed her hair like a teenager, and scoffed at the idea of getting older. After all, she wasn't just Harriet Winslow's younger sister, she was the prettier one. Rachel never settled for second place, especially not when her older sister was involved. She was younger, more glamorous, and she made sure Harriet knew it. But beneath the surface, she was still a widow struggling to redefine herself. Losing her husband Robert had left her feeling powerless, and if she wasn't someone's wife, then who was she? Talma Hopkins didn't just play Rachel, she brought to life a woman clinging to beauty, afraid that once the admiration faded, so would she. But true confidence comes from embracing every version of yourself, even the one you swore you'd never become. If love was easy, why was Maxine Johnson always getting it wrong? 14 was the age at which life was supposed to be about fun, about harmless crushes and silly daydreams. But for Maxine, it always felt like something more. As Laura Winslow's best friend, she was the wild one, the risk-taker, the girl who never let life get boring. But for all her confidence, she couldn't seem to find someone who loved her the way Steve loved Laura. She dated, flirted, and even played a few tricks, but love kept slipping through her fingers. And then came Waldo Faldo, the goofy, big-hearted guy who saw Maxine beyond the attitude and the big ideas. It took time for her to realize that love wasn't about finding the perfect person, it was about finding the right one. Maxine's story reminds us that sometimes what we're looking for isn't in the rush of excitement, it's in the quiet and the steady presence of someone who truly sees us. This marks the end of our Family Matters 1989 Cast Then and Now feature. While the show may have ended, the Winslows' love, laughter, and lessons will always be a part of us. If this video took you back to a special time, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Black Destiny, signing off. Until next time, keep your family united, your spirit unshaken, and your nostalgia burning bright.